The Velthary Dominion's third expeditionary fleet hung motionless in the purple haze of the Korath Nebula. 47 warships arranged in perfect formation, like predators waiting for prey to wander too close. Fleet Admiral Darvos stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Dominance, his 4 eyes scanning the tactical display with the calm confidence of someone who had never known defeat. And his scaled hands rested behind his back as junior officers moved around him in quiet efficiency. "Admiral," a young voice called out from the sensor station. "I am detecting an anomaly at the edge of the nebula." Darvos turned slowly to face Sensor Officer Vryn, a junior member of the crew who had only served aboard the Dominance for 6 standard months. And the Admiral's expression showed mild curiosity rather than concern. "What kind of anomaly?" Darvos asked. Vryn's clawed fingers moved across his console as data streamed across multiple screens, and his secondary eyes narrowed while his primary eyes remained fixed on the readings. "It appears to be a vessel, Admiral, but the design does not match anything in our database," Vryn reported. "The ship is small, roughly the size of one of our scout vessels, and it seems to be running on minimal power." Darvos walked closer to the sensor station, his heavy boots making soft sounds against the metal floor, and he leaned forward to examine the image that Vryn had projected onto the main view screen. The vessel was indeed small, with a boxy hull painted in white and gray, and strange markings decorated its side in a language that the Dominion's translation systems quickly decoded. "USS Wanderer." Darvos read aloud. "Earth Survey Course." A murmur spread through the bridge crew, and Darvos noticed several officers exchanging nervous glances that he found almost amusing. "Earth," the Admiral repeated, tasting the word like something unfamiliar. "That would make this a human vessel." Vryn pulled up additional information on his display, and what he found made his scales ripple with unease. "Admiral, according to our records, humans are a species from a high-gravity world with extreme environmental conditions," Vryn explained. "There are numerous reports about them from other civilizations, but most are classified as unreliable rumors." "What kind of rumors?" Darvos asked, though his tone suggested he already considered such stories to be nonsense. "Stories of unusual aggression and unpredictable behavior," Vryn answered carefully. "Some accounts describe humans as extremely dangerous, while others dismiss them as a minor species of no strategic importance." Darvos let out a sound that passed for laughter among the Velthary, a dry clicking from deep in his throat. "Dangerous?" He scoffed. "Look at that ship, Vryn. It is barely functional and drifting without power in the middle of nowhere, and you speak of danger?" The Admiral straightened and addressed his bridge crew with absolute authority. "Lock tractor beams onto that vessel and bring it into our hangar bay," he commanded. "We will inspect it, catalog its technology, and interrogate any survivors we find aboard." "Yes, Admiral," the tactical officer responded. And within moments, the Dominance reached out with invisible hands of energy to grasp the tiny human ship. But the instant the tractor beams made contact with the USS Wanderer, something unexpected happened. Every speaker on the bridge erupted with sound, a broadcast in a voice that was clearly human, and the message repeated itself in language after language, cycling through what Vryn quickly calculated to be over 200 different tongues. "Do not engage," the voice said in calm and measured tones. "Repeat. Do not engage. You have been warned." Darvos stared at the view screen as if the human ship had personally insulted him. "What is this?" he demanded. "A warning signal, Admiral," Vryn reported, his voice now tinged with genuine worry. "It activated the moment our tractor beams touched their hull, and it is broadcasting on every frequency we use." "Shut it down," Darvos ordered. "I am trying, Admiral, but the signal is not responding to our jamming attempts," another officer called out from the communications station. The warning continued to repeat. That same calm voice speaking those same 6 words over and over again. And Darvos felt something he had not experienced in many years. A tiny seed of doubt taking root in his mind. "Admiral," Vryn said suddenly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I am seeing something strange in the censored data. Speak clearly." Darvos snapped. Vryn looked up from his console, and his 4 eyes held an expression that Darvos recognized as fear. "The human vessel's power core," Vryn explained. "Initial scans showed it as nearly depleted, which is why the ship appeared to be drifting. But I have run deeper analysis, and the readings do not match." "What are you saying?" "The power core is not empty, Admiral," Vryn said. "It is deliberately suppressed, hidden from our standard sensors. Which means the humans wanted us to think their ship was helpless, before Darvos could respond. The signal changed, and instead of the repeating warning, a new sound filled the bridge. Something that made every Velthari present freeze in confusion. It was music, human music. A strange melody that seemed to burrow into their minds and make concentration difficult. And then the lights on the bridge flickered. "Admiral," the tactical officer shouted, "weapon systems are cycling into diagnostic mode without authorization. Navigation is locked." Another voice cried out, "Internal communications are filling with interference." Darvos stood in the center of his command deck as chaos erupted around him. And for the first time in his long career, he faced an enemy he did not understand on the main view screen. The tiny human ship continued to drift in the tractor beam's grip, looking as harmless as before, but Vryn knew better now. Somewhere aboard that vessel, humans were watching and waiting, and the Velthari fleet had just walked into their trap. The Admiral's confident expression had vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like the beginning of genuine fear. And Vryn found himself wondering what kind of species could cause such chaos with a single damaged ship. The warning signal had been clear from the start. They should not have engaged. Chaos spread through the Velthari fleet like a disease, jumping from ship to ship as the human signal wormed its way into systems that had been designed by the finest engineers in the Curve. Dominion Admiral Darvos gripped the railing of his command platform so hard that his claws left marks in the metal, and around him, officers shouted reports that grew more alarming with each passing moment. "The crushing wave has lost navigation completely." Someone called out, "3 ships in the outer formation are reporting weapons malfunctions." "Admiral, the signal is adapting to our countermeasures faster than we can deploy them." Darvos turned to his chief communications officer with fury burning in his 4 eyes. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "It is one small ship with damaged systems, so how can it be doing this to my entire fleet?" The officer shook his head, scales pale with confusion and fear. "The signal contains embedded code, Admiral," he explained. "It is exploiting vulnerabilities in our communication protocols that we did not even know existed. And every time we close one hole, the code finds another path in the sensor station." Young Vryn worked frantically at his console while trying to understand what they were facing, and with each new discovery, his respect for human ingenuity grew alongside his terror. This was not random destruction, he realized, but a carefully designed weapon meant to cripple without killing, to humiliate rather than annihilate. But who had created it, and why? The answer came from the USS Wanderer itself, deep within the small human vessel. Captain Laura Mitchell sat in a hidden compartment behind the engineering bay, her eyes fixed on a portable screen that showed everything happening aboard the Velthari flagship. She was a woman in her early 40s, with short dark hair now matted with dried blood from a wound on her forehead, and her uniform was torn and stained from days of survival in increasingly desperate conditions. Beside her, Lieutenant Kevin Park lay on a makeshift bed with his leg wrapped in bandages that needed changing. And despite his injuries, he managed a weak smile as he watched the alien scrambling. "It is working," Park whispered, his voice hoarse from dehydration. So far, Mitchell replied, never taking her eyes from the screen. But we both know this was never meant to hold an entire fleet for long. She thought back to how they had ended up here, trapped in enemy territory with nothing but their wits and a cyber warfare package that Earth's military had developed for emergencies. The USS Wanderer had been conducting a routine survey mission in unclaimed space when their sensors detected something troubling. Evidence of Velthory expansion toward territories allied with Earth. Mitchell had ordered a closer investigation, and that decision had nearly cost them everything. A Velthory patrol had found them before they could retreat, and the attack that followed had killed half her crew and left the Wanderer barely functional, but they had escaped with something valuable. Data on Velthory fleet movements and military capabilities that Earth desperately needed. Mitchell knew her damaged ship could never outrun a Dominion fleet. So she had devised a plan born of desperation and a deep understanding of how her enemies thought. The Velthory were arrogant, she had realized, confident in their technology and dismissive of species they considered inferior. They would see a crippled human ship and assume easy prey. They would not expect the prey to bite back. Captain, Park said, pulling her from her thoughts, they are trying to send boarding parties. Mitchell checked her screen and saw shuttles launching from several Velthory ships, their communications shielded against the signal that plagued the main fleet. Clever, she admitted. They figured out the signal only affects network systems, so isolated vessels can still function normally. What do we do? Mitchell stood and moved to a hidden console that controlled the Wanderer's external communications array, and her fingers hovered over the controls as she made a decision that would change everything. We stop hiding, she said on the bridge of the Dominance. Admiral Darvos had just finished screaming at his officers when every screen on his ship suddenly displayed the same image. A human face. Captain Laura Mitchell looked directly into the visual sensors, and though her appearance showed signs of exhaustion and injury, her eyes held a calm determination that made Darvos take an involuntary step backward. Admiral Darvos, Mitchell said, her voice carrying across every speaker on every ship in the fleet. My name is Captain Laura Mitchell of the Earth Survey Corps. Darvos could not respond, frozen by the sheer audacity of this moment. You have made a serious mistake today, Mitchell continued. You attacked a peaceful survey vessel, killed members of my crew, and attempted to capture technology that does not belong to you. She paused and let her words sink in. I'm going to give you one chance to correct this mistake, she said. You have 12 hours to withdraw from this sector and return to Dominion space, and if you do so, I will deactivate the signal and allow you to leave with your ships intact. Darvos finally found his voice, and it came out as a snarl of wounded pride. You dare threaten me? He spat. You are one human on one broken ship. Mitchell smiled, and something in that expression made Vryn's blood run cold. 12 hours. Admiral, she repeated. After that, the second wave begins. The screens went dark. Vryn looked at his admiral and saw a leader who no longer seemed so confident. And in that moment, the young sensor officer understood something important. The humans had not stumbled into this trap. They had built it themselves and waited for the Velthory to walk inside. And now, trapped within that invisible cage of code and chaos, the mightiest fleet in the Dominion had only 12 hours to decide its fate. Admiral Darvos stood alone in his private quarters, his hands trembling as he waited for the communication channel to connect with Dominion High Command. The chaos on his bridge had been contained for now, but his fleet remained crippled, and the human woman's deadline hung over him like a blade waiting to fall. The screen flickered to life, and the face of Grand Marshal Torvax appeared, the highest military authority in the entire Velthory Dominion. Admiral Darvos, Torvax said, his voice flat and unreadable. We have received your emergency transmission. So explained the situation. Darvos swallowed his pride and gave his report, describing the human ship, the signal, the chaos that had engulfed his fleet, and the ultimatum delivered by Captain Mitchell when he finished. He expected shock or outrage from the Grand Marshal, but instead, Torvax simply closed his eyes and let out a long breath. "I was afraid of this," the Grand Marshal said quietly. "Sir?" Darvos asked, confusion replacing his shame. "The humans," Torvax said. "We know about them, Admiral, and we have standing orders concerning their species that you apparently never received." Darvos felt his world shift beneath his feet. What orders? Idimen Tors leaned forward, and his expression hardened. 20 years ago, the Dominion sent an exploration fleet to a small planet at the edge of human territory. He began. The fleet commander decided to claim the world for the Dominion, believing the human colony there would surrender without resistance. The Grand Marshal paused, and something like pain flickered across his ancient features. 30 ships were sent to that world, he continued. Only 2 returned, and the survivors spoke of humans who fought with coordination we had never seen before. Soldiers who refused to surrender even when surrounded. Civilians who took up arms alongside their military. Darvos listened in growing horror as the story unfolded. The humans did not just defend their colony, Torvax said. They counterattacked, they pursued our fleeing ships, and they sent a message to the Dominion that arrived before our survivors did. What message? Darvos whispered. A simple warning, Torvax answered. They told us that they had no quarrel with the Volturi people, but if we ever threatened their worlds again, they would come for us, and they would not stop until every threat was eliminated. The Grand Marshal's 4 eyes locked onto Darvos through the screen. We buried this information to prevent panic, he admitted. We told our people that the exploration fleet was lost to natural disaster. And since then, we have quietly avoided human space. Darvos felt sick, his entire understanding of the galaxy crumbling around him. Why was I not told? He asked. Because we hoped the situation would never arise again, Torvax replied. Your fleet was supposed to patrol the nebula, not engage unknown vessels. The ship appeared helpless. Darvos protested weakly, and that should have made you more cautious. Not less, Torvax snapped. Humans are not like us, Admiral. They do not display strength through obvious shows of force. They hide their power until the moment they choose to reveal it on the USS Wanderer. Captain Mitchell worked alongside Lieutenant Park in the cramped engineering space, her hands moving quickly as she prepared for what she knew was coming. The upload is at 40%, Park reported. Checking a small device connected to the ship's hidden communication array, Mitchell nodded, her jaw tight with tension. The data they had gathered about Volturi fleet movements could change everything for Earth. Could save millions of lives if it reached the right people. But transmitting it to a hidden relay beacon took time they might not have. How long until completion? She asked. 6 more hours at least, Park answered. Maybe 7. Mitchell did the math in her head and felt her stomach tighten. The Volturi would not wait forever. And once they realized her threat was a bluff, they would come for the Wanderer with everything. We need a backup plan, she said. Park looked at her with tired eyes that still held a spark of dark humor. I thought the backup plan was dying heroically while denying them our ship and data? That was the original backup plan, Mitchell admitted. I am hoping for something slightly less fatal. Meanwhile, on the Dominance, young Vryn had discovered something that made his heart race with a mixture of fear and fascination while scanning the human vessels. Transmissions. He had detected a secondary signal hidden within the noise of the primary broadcast. A tight beam directed away from the fleet toward a distant point in space. The humans were sending something, data perhaps. Or a message. Everin's claws hovered over his console as he realized what this meant if he reported this discovery. Admiral Darvos would focus all efforts on blocking the transmission and capturing whatever information the humans were trying to send. But if he stayed silent, the humans might succeed in whatever they were planning. Vren thought about the stories Grand Marshal Torvax had shared, about humans who fought impossible odds and refused to surrender. He thought about Captain Mitchell's face on the viewscreen, calm and determined despite being trapped and outnumbered, and he thought about his own people, who had attacked the peaceful survey vessel and killed innocent crew members simply because they could for the first time in his life. Vren questioned whether being Velthari meant being right. His decision took only seconds, and when it was made, he felt something inside him change forever. He deleted the scan results and erased all evidence that the secondary transmission existed, whatever the humans were doing. He would not be the one to stop them. The young sensor officer looked at the view screen where the USS Wanderer still hung in the tractor beam's grip, and he whispered words that no Velthari had ever spoken before. "Good luck, humans." 6 hours had passed since Captain Mitchell's ultimatum, and Admiral Darvos had made his decision. The Grand Marshal's revelations had shaken him, but they had also awakened something darker in his heart, a desperate need to prove that the Dominion was not as weak as those old stories suggested. He would capture the human ship, take its crew alive, if possible, and show the galaxy that one small vessel could not humiliate the Third Fleet. All ships with functional systems, prepare for coordinated assault, Darvos commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos still affecting half his fleet. Launch boarding parties from every available shuttle on the sensor station. Vren watched the orders spread through the fleet with growing dread. He had already sabotaged the tracking systems to hide the human data transmission, but there was nothing more he could do without revealing his betrayal. The young officer could only hope that his small act of defiance would be enough aboard the USS Wanderer. Alarms blared as Captain Mitchell detected the incoming assault. "They are coming," Park said from his position at the makeshift monitoring station. "I count 15 shuttles approaching from multiple directions." Mitchell checked the data upload status and felt her heart sink. 87% complete, so close, yet still too far. "We knew this might happen," she said, keeping her voice calm for Park's benefit, even as her mind raced through options. "To self-destruct?" Park asked. Mitchell nodded slowly, moving toward a hidden panel in the wall that contained the Wanderer's last resort. A modified engine core that could be overloaded to create an explosion, powerful enough to vaporize the ship and everything within 1,000 kilometers. "If they board us, they cannot be allowed to capture the intelligence we gathered," she said. "Earth needs that data. And if it means we go down with the ship, then we go down fighting," Park finished, and despite his injuries, he pushed himself up from the bed and stood beside his Captain. Mitchell looked at the young engineer and saw no fear in his eyes, only the quiet acceptance of someone who understood what duty meant. "Kevin," she said softly, "you should try to escape, find a life pod and—" "No," Park interrupted. "I am not leaving you alone, Captain. And besides, someone needs to make sure the destruct sequence actually works." Mitchell smiled despite everything. "Stubborn to the end," she said. "I learned from the best." The first Velthari shuttles were now visible through the Wanderer's external cameras, sleek predators closing in on wounded prey. And Mitchell placed her hand on the destruct panel. "Computer," she said, "prepare engine overload sequence." "Authorization Mitchell 77 Alpha." "Sequence prepared," the computer responded. Awaiting final confirmation, Mitchell opened the channel to the Velthari fleet one last time, and her face appeared on screens across every ship. "Admiral Darvos," she said, "I warned you to withdraw, and you chose to attack instead." Darvos glared at her image from his command deck. "Your threats mean nothing," he snarled. "In minutes, my soldiers will be aboard your ship. Yes, Mitchell agreed. They will, and when they arrive, they will find nothing but fire. She held up her hand so the camera could see her finger hovering over the final confirmation button. I am activating self-destruct, she announced. My ship's engine core will overload in exactly 3 minutes, creating an explosion that will destroy everything within blast radius, including your shuttles and several of your closest warships. Panic erupted across the Valkyrie. Fleet shuttle pilots screamed for new orders. Warship captains demanded to know if they were within the danger zone. And Admiral Darvos watched his carefully planned assault dissolve into chaos once again. All ships, emergency withdrawal. He shouted, "Get clear of that vessel now." The Valkyrie shuttles scattered like frightened animals, racing back toward their motherships, while the nearest warships fired their engines and tried to put distance between themselves and the suicidal human. Vessel Mitchell watched them run and allowed herself a small smile. That should buy us some time, she whispered, because the truth was that the self-destruct was a bluff. The Wanderer's engines were too damaged to actually overload, and the readings the Valkyrie sensors were detecting were nothing more than modified sensor ghosts designed to simulate an imminent explosion. It was a trick, a desperate gamble that depended entirely on the enemy's fear of the unknown. Upload status? Mitchell asked. 94%, Park reported. Then his eyes went wide. Captain, sensors are detecting something new. More shuttles? No, Park said, and his voice carried something Mitchell had not heard in days. Hope. It is a ship, Park continued. Human design. Coming out of the asteroid field at high speed. Mitchell rushed to the sensor display and felt tears forming in her eyes as she recognized the vessel emerging from hiding the USS Pioneer, a fast attack cruiser she had served on years ago, and behind it, more contacts. Park shouted, 5, 10, 15 human warships, all emerging from coordinated jump points. On the bridge of the Dominance, Admiral Darvos stared at his tactical display as it filled with new signatures, and his scales went pale with pure terror. The human fleet had arrived, and leading that fleet, Captain Daniel Shaw of the Pioneer opened a communication channel that broadcast to every Valkyrie ship. His face was calm, his voice steady, and his words cut through the chaos like a blade. "Attention, Valkyrie fleet," Shaw said. "You should have listened to her." The reinforcements took position around the damaged Wanderer, like wolves protecting one of their own. And Mitchell finally allowed herself to breathe. They had survived, and the real fight was about to begin. The Korath Nebula had become a standoff between two fleets, one battered and broken, the other fresh and ready for battle. Admiral Darvos stood on his command deck surrounded by officers who no longer looked at him with respect. And the tactical display showed a truth he could not deny. The humans had him completely outmatched. 16 human warships faced his 47 vessels. But half the Valkyrie fleet still suffered from the cyber warfare attack, and even those with working systems were damaged from the chaos of the past hours. "Admiral," his first officer said quietly, "several captains are requesting permission to discuss surrender terms." Darvos wanted to rage, to demand that his fleet fight to the last ship. But the words died in his throat when he looked at the human formation. They were not attacking despite having every advantage. The humans simply held position and waited, and that patience terrified Darvos more than aggression ever could. On the bridge of the USS Pioneer, Captain Daniel Shaw studied the Valkyrie fleet with the calm focus of a chess player considering his next move. "Status of the Wanderer?" he asked. "Stable," his communications officer reported. "Captain Mitchell confirms her crew is alive and the data upload completed successfully, and she sends her thanks." Shaw allowed himself a small smile before opening a channel to the Valkyrie flagship. "Admiral Darvos," he said. "My name is Captain Daniel Shaw of the Earth Alliance Navy, and I am here to offer you terms. Darvos appeared on the view screen, looking decades older than he had just hours before. Terms? The Velthari Admiral asked, and his voice held none of its earlier arrogance. Immediate withdrawal from this sector, Shaw stated. Release of any human prisoners your fleet may hold, and a formal agreement that Velthari forces will not enter this region again without prior notification. And if I refuse? Shaw's expression did not change, but something in his eyes grew cold. Then my fleet will demonstrate why your High Command has spent 20 years avoiding human space, he said. I have 16 ships and crews who watched you attack a peaceful survey vessel, and they are very eager to show you what happens when humans decide to stop being peaceful. The threat hung in the air, and every Velthari on the bridge of the Dominance understood it was not a bluff. Darvos opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, another voice cut through the tension. I will accept responsibility. Every eye turned to the sensor station, where young Vryn stood at attention. His scales pale, but his 4 eyes steady. What are you doing? Darvos, Vryn, ignored his admiral and addressed the view screen directly. Captain Shaw, he said, my name is Sensor Officer Vryn, and I have information that may interest you. Shaw raised an eyebrow but nodded for the young Velthari to continue during this engagement. I discovered that the USS Wanderer was transmitting data to a hidden relay beacon, Vryn explained. I deleted my scan results and sabotaged our tracking systems to prevent interference with that transmission. Gasps filled the bridge, and Darvos stared at Vryn with pure disbelief. You committed treason, the Admiral breathed. I chose not to help my people commit a greater crime, Vryn corrected. We attacked an innocent ship, killed innocent crew members, and threatened to capture technology that did not belong to us. So yes, I helped the humans. And I would do it again. He straightened and met Shaw's gaze through the view screen. I offer myself as a prisoner in exchange for lenient treatment of my crewmates, Vryn said. Most of them were simply following orders, and they do not deserve to die for the mistakes of their leaders. Shaw considered this for a long moment before a new voice joined the conversation. Daniel, let me talk to him. Captain Laura Mitchell appeared on a secondary screen, her face still showing signs of injury, but her eyes bright with fierce intelligence. Vryn, she said, I monitored Velthari communications throughout this engagement, and I know what you did for us. Vryn lowered his head respectfully. You saved the lives of my crew, Mitchell continued, and you helped ensure that critical intelligence reached Earth. So I am going to recommend that you receive asylum in human space if you want it. Vryn hesitated, clearly not expecting this outcome. I would be honored. With that settled, Shaw returned his attention to Admiral Darvos. You have your terms, he said. I suggest you accept them before my patience runs out. Darvos looked around his bridge at officers who stared back with expressions ranging from relief to shame, and he realized that he had already lost everything that mattered. His pride, his reputation, and the respect of his crew. We accept, he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The Velthari fleet began its withdrawal within the hour. Damaged ships limping toward home, while human vessels watched their retreat in silence. 3 months later, Vryn stood on the observation deck of Armstrong Station, Earth's largest orbital facility, and watched the blue planet slowly rotate beneath him. He had been granted asylum as promised and now served as a cultural liaison between humanity and the few Velthari who wished to establish peaceful relations. Captain Mitchell had been promoted to Commodore and given command of a new exploration cruiser, and Lieutenant Park was recovering in a hospital in Sydney, already planning his return to active duty. The galaxy had changed because of what happened in the Korath Nebula. Word of the Third Fleet's humiliation had spread throughout the Dominion and beyond, And species that had once feared the Velthari now whispered about the humans who had defeated them with a single damaged ship. But the most surprising development came from Dominion High Command itself rather than seeking revenge. They had sent diplomatic envoys to Earth's border, not with weapons, but with offers of trade and cooperation. The humans had sent a message the galaxy could not ignore. They could destroy their enemies, but they would rather make friends. Vrin smiled as he watched Earth turn slowly in the void, and he thought about how his people had seen humans as monsters to be feared now. He understood the truth. Humans were complicated and dangerous. Yes, but they were also compassionate and full of surprises. They would fight without mercy when threatened, but they would extend a hand in friendship just as readily, and they never, ever gave up the young Velthari, who had once served a fleet dedicated to conquest, now served a species dedicated to something greater. And as he watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, he knew he had made the right choice. The galaxy would never be the same, and that, Vrin decided, was a very good thing.